I am about to make what might be my very last Otter Cascade SMaSH. Right here you can see all that yeast getting churned up in there. That's because I had let it sit for about an hour. That's my starter, to get the yeast to settle, and then I poured a nice little shot glass of it just to taste it, test it, make sure that it's okay, make sure it's not infected. You don't want to use an infected starter. And I have 16 ounces of Cascade. No, I don't intend to use those now. I intended to use those in the next 4 batches of Otter Cascade SMaSH. However, this one is Otter Cascade SMaSH number 3, and I don't much care for it. So I'm kind of wanting to get away from it. I just bought 4 ounces of Fuggles, so I could shift to making Otter Fuggles single malt and single hop, to see how that differs from Cascade. Kind of learn what the flavor of Fuggles is. But what on earth would I do with all this Cascade? So I don't really know what I'm going to do. I do know that I very much loved the first Otter Cascade SMaSH I made. It used Munton's Otter instead of Maillard malts. The thing with the Muntons is it said it was guaranteed at least 66 or 67% Otter, which I didn't like. I mean, for one thing, it suggests inconsistency. If it says at least, that kind of suggests that sometimes you might only get 66%, other times you might get 90% Otter. What's the rest of it? They don't even say. So I switched to this since it's entirely Otter. And none of them have been as good since. But that is something that I attribute to the different hop profiles, which is what this experiment has been all about. It's all about using the same ingredients every time, but just changing the hop schedule. And with that in mind, I'm going to do something that will... So the first Otter was kind of bitter, but not very. And it had a lot of aroma, but I didn't detect much in the way of flavor, at least not flavor that I would attribute to the Cascade. I attributed it to the Otter. I'm kind of going to try to emphasize that this time. I'm going to put 1.5 ounces in at 60 minutes to get bitterness. So a previous Otter Cascade SMaSH, I used 2 ounces, and I thought it was just a little too bitter. And that first one that I liked a whole lot, I thought it could be just a little bit more bitter. So 1.5 ounces at 60 minutes. And then it had aroma, and I liked the aroma. I'm going to sort of overemphasize that aroma by dry hopping 1.5 ounces for 72 hours as the fermentation starts to slow down. So that takes care of 3 ounces. What's the other ounce? The other ounce I'm going to put in at 8 minutes, which according to this chart should be where to put it in for aroma. It's like, wait a minute, isn't the dry hopping for aroma? Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work, but I'm thinking that I'll get something that tastes like the very first Otter Cascade I made, but which might be a bit more bold. I hope I'm not losing my mind or something, but I just realized I did something really stupid. I made beer, I guess, a week ago, and my hop sack was in a strainer in this sink right here. And when I was cleaning up, and I hadn't even had a single beer, I can remember, right now, I can remember opening the lid of this can and throwing my hop sack away with the hops in it. Made no sense whatsoever. I've had that hop sack for many, many, many brews, and I just threw it away absent-mindedly. That's just ridiculous. Anyway, this is a 3-gallon boil if you haven't ever seen the previous Otter Cascade videos. It started off with 2 gallons of boiling water. Then I took it off the burner and stirred in the 6 pounds of Maillard malts Otter. I've saved this for a while because it's exactly half a gallon. I filled that up with hot water out of the tap, which is way too hot to touch, but it's not boiling. And I used that to rinse out the one that had the extract in it. So it's all in there, getting brought up to a boil, and I guess this time what I'm going to have to do is just dump the hops right in. That's 1.5 ounces right there. So I've got two options. I can just leave the hops in, let them sit in the fermenter. Is that bad? I don't know. I think that's probably bad. The other option is that I have a large hop sack, the kind of size that people use for brew in a bag, that sort of thing. And I can use that. I've done this a lot, usually with my Cooper's fermenter, which I'm not going to use here, but I can put that into, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put that into the fermenter and then pour my wort into there so that when I lift up the bag, whatever you call it, giant hop sack, whatever, giant grain bag, it will filter out the hops. I feel like an idiot. Oh well. Extract brewing is so easy. I mean, once you've done it a few times and you know things like where to put your burner so that your wort will boil but not boil over, and you just can do that. You can even then leave the room if you want. It used to be in the beginning when I would brew beer, I would read through all of the instructions first. I would try to make sure that I had everything that I needed in the kitchen ready to go. Frequently I made mistakes even then. And now I've reached this point where all I have to do is the first step. And once I've got the first step going, I think, okay, what's the next step? And I make sure that I'm prepared for the next step when the time comes to make it. And then it's what's the next step? And it's just become so easy. Everyone should do this. It is just so easy. Speaking of the next step, here it is in one pitcher. 1.5 pounds of dextrose, 1 ounce of Cascade, and a whirlflock tablet. When my timer goes off, got 21 minutes left, I will stir that in. And then I'll have to reset the timer for 8 minutes. After that, next step, got my silver serpent here, the wort chiller, and I'll cool the wort down. I've got some water in the freezer, but I don't know how cold it's going to be. I put it in the freezer a little bit late. So, I'm going to have to look at the temperature. There's a thermometer inside the container. Look at the temperature as the time approaches and determine what temperature my wort needs to be cooled down to. But that's how easy this is. That's just about all there is to it, besides mixing the wort with fresh water and then dumping in the, well, pitching the yeast. Easy stuff. So this is kind of interesting. I measure my wort volume. I figured out how many gallons to put for however many inches I have in there. I then use a spreadsheet, which is over here, which computes based on how cold my cold water is and how many inches of wort I have, what temperature I need the wort to drop down to. And once it's dropped down, in this case it needs to be 27.9 or 28 degrees Celsius. Once it reaches there, then I'll be able to mix my cold water with it up to 5 gallons. And I will have just the right temperature. So I got my wort down to just exactly 28 degrees. And this is that brew bag I was talking about, which I'm using to filter. Oop, there goes the rubber band. Which I'm using, I star sand the heck out of this bag, by the way, which I'm using to filter out all of the hops. And it is quite heavy. right now. You can hear it draining. And it's going to take a minute to drain all these hops out. Now my water, which is in the fridge, it was 1.1 degrees about 8 minutes ago. Well, it's in the freezer. And I don't know how good my freezer is, but you'd have to think, I don't know, maybe it's a little colder. We'll see how this works out. I just realized something. That is a large volume of stuff that I am taking out of there. And I've never done it, well, I've done it like this before, but when I've been carefully measuring like this to figure out my temperatures, I've never done this before. So I didn't realize at the time, I've made kind of a mistake in that this is quite a volume of stuff I'm taking out of there. So I don't have the right volumes to determine what temperature I should have reduced the wort down to. And because I'm ending up with less wort than I thought, because I'm taking all of that out of it, all of those hops and all the stuff that's soaked into it, I've reduced the temperature a little too much. So what I'm going to do is just fill it up, not quite as far as I'm supposed to, and then use some room temperature water to bring it up. So yes, exactly as I feared, it turned out to be a little too cold, about 15 degrees Celsius. So I added some room temperature water, but there's no way I could possibly add enough to get it to the right temperature. I'm not too worried about it though. I'm just going to go ahead and pitch the yeast anyway. I know the yeast should be at a slightly lower temperature, but I kind of doubt that in blind taste tests, anyone would notice the difference between yeast pitched at just the right temperature and yeast pitched at a couple degrees too high or whatever. So let's see what it is now. I gave it a good stir, gave my thermometer a second to get acclimated. Still 15 degrees. I don't know, maybe I'll put the lid on and I'll wait for an hour. I'm going to be up an hour anyway. That is a really good idea. I'm going to put the lid on, wait for an hour. Then I will pitch my yeast and I'll be off to the races. So here's my fermenter. I have that strange yeast floating on top. It just burped. It's doing that every, I don't know, 30 or 45 seconds. And I'm about to do something a little strange. I have got HDX brand, which I think stands for Home Depot something. Paint strainers is what these are, for all types of paints and stains. Now, somebody, I think it was in a chat over Skype, mentioned using paint strainers instead of hop sacks. So I'm going to give it a try. I have a hunch that he may be somebody who uses whole leaf hops, because I think they'd work well for that, but since I threw away my hop sack accidentally, these were handy, so I'm going to try one. So there one is. It's got kind of a top on it that will squeeze to the outside of a paint bucket. It's not small enough. I'm going to have to find some fishing line or something. I think I have some of that to tie up the top with. But you can see that it's a mesh. And I think some of the hops are going to get through, but it's what I have. So there it is. 1.5 ounces in there. I hope that was the right amount. Maybe I should go back and listen to my video. I may have miscalculated. But got the fishing line. You can kind of see it here. Sealed under the lid such that it keeps it from falling all the way down into the beer. And off we go. I made a mistake. I went 4 days instead of 3 days. No big deal, I think. Time to get it out of there. Going to do this without the camera. So how well did the paint strainer work? I don't know. Does that look like, what was it, 1.5 ounces? Whatever it was. Yeah, I think it probably worked fairly well, but you can see that there's some that's made it to the outside of the bag up there. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm holding my phone in my hand, so this part looks a little strange. But I'm finally draining this. This is day 36 that it's been in there. I guess it was, what, 4 or 5 days of fermentation before dry hopping, which was another, I think, 4 or 5 days. I know I think earlier I said 4, but I'm not too sure about that. I don't really care. But, so, what is that, like 9 or 10 days, or 8 to 10 days before the end of the dry hopping, and then it's just been sitting there for, well, now it's up to 36 days since it was brewed. I probably should have filtered this. Hang on. Sorry, I just noticed there weren't any bubbles coming up from in there. That's my paranoia, is oxygen. So I make sure that I have carbon dioxide bubbling up from the bottom of the fermenter as I drain it. I should have filtered this, I'm thinking, but I never filtered any of the others, so I'm trying to be consistent. Got all that weird yeast in there. It's like, is that highly flocculated or is it low flocculation? I don't know. But it, it gathers into chunks. Man, that was terrible getting that out of there. Look at that weird-ass yeast. And I don't know if you can tell. I think you can, yeah. You can see all the little particles floating around in there. And it is just too late at night for me to decide to filter this. I don't want to be up another 3 hours. I want to go to bed. So, I guess I'm just going to stick it in there and, I don't know. I almost filtered it, and then I realized just how tired I do not want to be tomorrow morning. And I decided to just go with it the way it is, and let that yeast, whatever it is, settle out. Might show up in the first few glasses, but then it'll probably go as crystal clear as I'm accustomed to it being. Well, it's been a long time coming, but it's here at last. Kind of looks a little bit cloudy, which definitely wasn't the case before I transferred it to the keg. So it's got stuff shook up in there. That yeast that I couldn't keep out. If I had it to do over again, I'd probably filter it. I'd probably wait till my day off. And I just had days off. That's why I didn't want to wait. I wanted to get it in a keg because I only have one keg with beer in it. And it's nice to have a choice, or a variety. Kind of bitter, which is good. It's a little bit more bitter than I think I really like. Since it's been sitting there for so long, I kind of wonder if the bitterness is going to go away. It's sort of like that bitterness you have, I don't know, if you eat the white pith of an orange or a grapefruit, that sort of bitter aftertaste that's left, that's kind of what it's like. And the reason it's like that is because there's a sort of citrusy character to this that is much stronger than anything I've had in one of these Otter Cascades so far. And although the dry hopping supposedly is supposed to affect aroma. Maybe I just don't have a good nose, I don't know, but I'm not catching aroma off of this at all. But that flavor, the bitterness plus that sort of citrus flavor that makes it kind of grapefruit-like, that is really good. This is that last one I made that I just didn't like very much, and I thought, you know, maybe I don't need to make these anymore. This one I am liking. It is just a little bit more bitter than a little too strong in the bitter flavor, which if it came from that dry hopping instead of leaving it in there 4 days, maybe if I had left it in only the original 3, if that's where that flavor is coming from. I assume it has to be, because that's why I did this. It was to each one of these Otter Cascades I've made, I've used the exact same ingredients. The only thing I've changed is the hop schedule. And I haven't had one that tasted like this yet, but I have done put hops in for 60 minutes and less. Okay, a little bitter, but I really like the flavor. Cheers. Now what should I do? I guess I'll put, since I've mentioned filtering, I'm going to put a filtering video down at the lower right, and I will put the Otter Cascade series list up at the upper right, and there will be a mystery at the upper left, and if you'd like to subscribe, you can click at the lower left. See ya.